Resuming debate, the honourable member for St. Albert, Edmonton.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I rise this evening in strong support of Bill C-30, an act to implement the Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement between Canada and the European Union. You know, Madam Speaker, it has been a long time coming, more than a decade, and there have been so many people who have been involved on the Canadian side in helping shape CETA. Certainly, much credit is owed to Canada's world-class trade negotiators who, for 10 years, did much of the heavy lifting. And I would also be remiss if I didn't acknowledge several honourable members in this House who played an instrumental role in concluding CETA. Much credit is due to the honourable members for Abbotsford and Battleford's Lloydminster. Under their leadership, Canada reached an agreement in principle with the European Union in 2014. Also, credit is owed to the honourable member for York Centre, who, as Canada's international trade minister, started the commencement of negotiations with the European Union back in 2009 and did a lot of the early heavy lifting, as did Stockwell Day, by the way, when he was the Minister of International Trade. And credit is owed to our current Minister of Foreign Affairs, who in her previous portfolio as Minister of International Trade helped get CETA across the finish line. And finally, Madam Speaker, credit is owed to Prime Minister Stephen Harper. It was Prime Minister Stephen Harper who had a great vision when it comes to market liberalization and free trade. And for 10 years, Prime Minister Harper presided over a decade of success when it comes to trade, including the signing of an historic number of free trade agreements, 46 free trade agreements, and CETA being the largest of those free trade agreements. Indeed, CETA is the largest free trade agreement since NAFTA. Madam Speaker, Canada is a trading nation. 2/3 of Canada's GDP is tied to trade. 1 in 5 jobs is tied to trade. Since the ratification of the Canada-U.S. Free Trade Agreement in 1988, trade between Canada and the United States has flourished. Indeed, each and every day, there is some $2 billion in trade between Canada and the United States. Now, Canada, of course, does have preferential treatment, preferential access to the U.S. market through NAFTA. And now, with CETA, Canada stands to gain preferential access to the largest economy in the world, the European Union. The European Union, which comprises of 28 member states, has a population of more than 500 million people and boasts an annual economic activity of nearly $20 trillion. Madam Speaker, what's more is that the European Union is in fact not one of, but rather the largest importers in the world, which complements Canada's export-driven economy. Canada already does a lot of trade with the European Union. The European Union is Canada's second largest trading partner. Each and every year, Canada does approximately $80 to $90 billion in trade with the European Union. Over the years, Canada's economic ties with the European Union have been strengthened. Indeed, when we look at exports, for example, we have seen exports to the European market increase from some $17.9 billion in 1997 to $40 billion today. And, Madam Speaker, with CETA, Canada's economic and trade ties to the EU promises to grow even stronger. Indeed, an early Canada-EU joint study projected that bilateral trade between Canada and the European Union stands to gain by some 20% thanks to CETA. Now, Madam Speaker, for my province of Alberta, CETA is nothing short of a big win. The European Union is Alberta's fourth largest export destination. It is also Alberta's third largest trading partner. Simply put, what CETA means for Alberta is the elimination of almost all EU tariff lines on Alberta exports destined for the European market. Madam Speaker, under CETA, EU agricultural and agri-food tariff lines will be eliminated. 94% will be eliminated immediately. That number will eventually rise to 95%. And with the elimination of those agricultural and agri-food tariff lines, there are tremendous opportunities for Alberta's large and vibrant agricultural and agri-food sectors. In that regard, Madam Speaker, the Canadian Agri-Food Trade Alliance projects that Canadian agri-food exports to the European Union will grow by some $1.5 billion thanks to CETA. Madam Speaker, it isn't just agriculture and the agricultural sector that stands to benefit from CETA. Frankly, it's all sectors of the Canadian and Alberta economies. That's because, Madam Speaker, under CETA, nearly 100% of non-agricultural tariffs will be eliminated. That presents enormous opportunities for many, many sectors, including the service sector. The service sector comprises of about 54% of Alberta's GDP. 1.5 million Alberta jobs are tied to the service sector. Under CETA, Canadian service suppliers stand to gain the best market access to the European Union compared to the EU's other free trade partners. Madam Speaker, what that means is new markets and new opportunities for Alberta and Canada's service suppliers. Madam Speaker, investment is important to the Canadian economy, and it is absolutely crucial in connecting Canada to global supply chains. When we look at, for example, investment, Canadian foreign direct investment to the European Union last year equaled $210 billion. That is roughly 21 or 22% of Canadian foreign direct investment directed into the European Union. Now, with CETA, what CETA promises investors is to help facilitate investment, both for Canadian investors and for European investors. Not only that, Madam Speaker, CETA means for investors more certainty, more transparency, and more protection. Now, while there is much to be proud of and much to look forward to with CETA, I have to say it isn't entirely good news. It isn't entirely good news because, Madam Speaker, when our government left office 15 months ago and passed on the torch to this government, we gave this government essentially a free trade agreement with the European Union on a silver platter.
Yes.
Wow.
And for whatever reason, the government the Liberals over there decided that it somehow wasn't good enough, that they were going to reopen it. And you know what that resulted in, Madam Speaker? It resulted in a lesser deal for Canada.
Yes. Wow.
It resulted in a lesser deal for Canada when the European Union made the commitment to regional governments to put in agricultural safeguards to protect against import surges. And when we talk about investment, which is very, very important and a very important aspect of the CETA agreement, there's also some uncertainty. There's uncertainty surrounding the investor-state settlement dispute process, which will not be part of the provisional coming into force of this agreement, which it was under the deal that was negotiated by our previous Conservative government. So, Madam Speaker, it isn't all good news, but that shouldn't take away from the fact that on the whole, CETA is a good deal. And in that regard, when we take a step back and look at CETA and what it means for Canada, one important fact is it will mean that Canada will have preferential market access to both the United States and the European Union, the two largest economies in the world. Combined, the United States and the European Union represent about 50% of global GDP. And of course, from a strategic standpoint, CETA is a big win relative to the United States, inasmuch as Canada will get first mover advantage in relation to the European Union. And that presents many opportunities for Canada, including in terms of becoming an investment gateway for European Union investors seeking access to the United States market through NAFTA, and an investment gateway for U.S. investors seeking access to the European Union market. Madam Speaker, CETA means more trade. It means more opportunities for Canadian businesses, and it means more jobs for Canadians. Madam Speaker, after 10 years of hard work and tough negotiations, Canada is on the cusp of achieving this historic free trade agreement. Madam Speaker, for jobs, for growth, and for the long-term prosperity of Canada, let's get it done. Let's get CETA across the finish line. Let's pass Bill C-30. Thank you.
Questions and comments. Questions et commentaires. The honourable member for New Brunswick Southwest.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Certainly, what I would agree in terms of my previous member's statement would be our shared values with the Europeans, and certainly the opportunities for expanding markets. Does the honourable member from St. Albert Edmundston believe, as I, that this agreement is a positive antidote to the rise of protectionism? Thank you.
The honourable member for St. Albert. St. Albert Edmonton, yes.
Yes. Yeah, Madam Speaker, I want to thank my friend, the honourable member for New Brunswick Southwest, for that question. We have seen over the last year or so a troubling turn in many parts of the world, a turn inwards. And I would submit now more than ever, it's absolutely essential that we get this agreement done. And look, the United States is an important ally and an important trading partner of Canada, and that will always be the case. But we can no longer have all our eggs in one basket. And that is what CETA provides. It provides an opportunity to open new markets and new opportunities for Canadians, and it's why now more than ever we must get this deal done. We must implement CETA.
Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires. The honourable member for Vancouver Kingsway.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Well, I'd like to thank my honourable colleague for his speech. You know, in the previous Parliament, Prime Minister Harper offered $4.3 billion in compensation to Canada's agriculture sector in compensation for the damage that he acknowledged CETA would do to their industry, because you don't offer billions of dollars to an industry if it's not going to experience damage. Prime Minister Harper offered $1.1 billion in compensation to the auto sector, another acknowledgement that the Canadian auto sector was going to be damaged by CETA, or else I don't know why Prime Minister Harper was going to give taxpayer dollars to the auto sector. And of course, he promised $400 million to Newfoundland and Labrador. I'm wondering, my honourable colleague, what his thoughts are on the damage that's going to be done to those sectors, particularly now that we've heard nothing from the Liberal government about honouring any of those promises to those sectors.
So given the time, just a brief answer for the member from St. Albert, Edmonton, please.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. Thanks to the member for Vancouver Kingsway for that question. Certainly, in terms of the compensation package for dairy producers, the compensation package offered by this Liberal government is a pittance compared to the compensation package offered by our previous Conservative government. It's a disappointment, and it's an issue that we're going to continue to hold the Liberals to account on. Thank you.